Greetings for Sci-Fi and the Fear of God podcast fan. You're here from Horror, Sci-Fi, and Beyond. And who are the Fear of God podcast, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you're asked, because they are my current guests in my first interview here on Horror, Sci-Fi, and Beyond. What an honor. The Fear of God podcast consists of Reed Lackey and Nathan Rouse, two college friends who decided to start a Christian horror podcast where they explore, not explain, the intersection of faith and fear. Now, sadly, Nathan couldn't be here with us tonight, but we have his co-host, his ghost host, with the most, Mr. Reed Lackey. And you may remember Mr. Lackey from our top 13 favorite horror movie moments, which was our big Halloween special last year, and our Christmas special where we reviewed the Muppets Christmas Carol. How you doing, Mr. Lackey?
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Drew. I'm doing very well, very happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get started with the interview, I just want to kind of promote what you're doing over on your podcast. You're actually doing Samalama-rama, which you're doing part 2 of in my Samalak movies, because you did his more classic ones earlier in your tenure as podcasters or horror podcasters.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And what you're doing, and another cool thing you're doing is you're actually reviewing his produced show Servant on Apple Plus. So you're doing it 3 episodes at a time, from what I understand. And that's pretty cool. And I'm actually gonna follow it with you. So I won't watch ahead. So I have to listen to your episode first before I can where you review the 3 episodes, and I'll watch the next 3 episodes. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm 6 episodes in, and I'm really intrigued. And I implore anybody listening to this, definitely watch that show, because it is out there for sure.
It's a fascinating show. No, thank you for that. And we covered M. Night Shyamalan's biggest, most popular films early in our podcasting world, early in The Fear of God. We covered Sixth Sense, we covered Signs, we covered The Village, The Visit, and Split. And then we haven't revisited his catalog for quite a while. In fact, the first ever movie episode that we did, episode number 2, our first episode of our show was just kind of introducing people to who we are. And then the second episode that we ever did was the M. Night Shyamalan written, though it was directed by John Eric Dowdle, Devil. So M. Night Shyamalan holds a lot of and Shyamalan holds a lot of prestige in our hearts. Like, we're big fans, not big fans of everything that he's done. He's definitely got some big misses out there as well. And actually, that's what this part 2 is, an opportunity to kind of dive into some of those lesser liked and a little bit more divisive, more polarizing films, and hopefully have a really great conversation around it. But also, as part of that, we're going to be covering specifically the films we didn't cover before. So stuff like Lady in the Water, Old, Knock at the Cabin. We're going to get to Glass. So we're going to cover the stuff that we didn't cover before, but then we're also going to be along the way, like you said, when we cover certain large sections of Servant, we're also going to be revisiting some of the films that we had already covered before, not devoting a whole episode to it, but having a little subsection where we check back in on The Village and our feelings about it, check back in on Signs and our feelings about it. How has that aged? How does that, how does that film slap these days? And so those are the kinds of things that that we're really excited to do. That's why we're calling it, it's the big festival. It's Shamalama. So yeah, we're having fun with it.
Just real quick before we get to the main chunk of the interview, what about Mr. M. Night Shyamalan do you like? Like, well, what's
That's
appealing to
a
him?
great question. The biggest thing that I love about it is he has two things consistently in his films that resonate a lot with me. Most of his films, not every single one of them, but most of them have a strong element of suspense to them. Some of them outright horror, but most of them, at least to a degree, suspenseful. But also, he has a strong emotional component to it in most of his films, which is something that I really resonate with a lot. His films are not terribly cold or plastic. He definitely has a deep, resonant emotional quality to at least what he's aiming for and what he's trying to convey. Now, he doesn't always get there, and a lot of times it's very muddled. Usually, when he gets very idea-centric or sometimes too plot-heavy, then some of the emotion gets a little buried and it doesn't land as effectively as it should. But the other thing that I find very interesting about him is a lot of his films, not all of them, but most of his films have also a certain spiritual interest as well, but not necessarily in a specifically, not always in a very linear translation to a certain kind of religion, but just a particular sensibility around spirituality and how that affects our, our outlook and our navigation through things. One last thing that I'll mention that I love is he loves telling big stories in microcosm. There are a couple of exceptions. Of course, The Happening is an exception to what I'm describing. But if you think about Signs is a story about alien invasion that basically is all centralized on this one family on this one farm. Lady in the Water as well, which I know not a lot of people like that movie, but it talks about big earth-changing things that all takes place in this one little niche apartment building. So I love I'll mention Old. All takes place on that one beach. So I love that he tells these somewhat confined stories that have bigger, broader implications. That resonates a lot with me. It echoes a lot of my favorite novels.
Knock at the Cabin's another one.
Yeah, Knock at the Cabin, same thing. It's literally the world is ending, but it's all centralized around this one remote cabin with these individuals having to make a choice.
I gotta be honest with you, Reed. I like those kind of like movies more than like seeing it as a big group of people, because when you say big group of people, like even with The Mist, like you really see the worst of humanity. And my personal, I'm not saying it's the best alien movie. I'm not saying these are the scariest aliens in movie history. But as far as like people being crappy to each other, would be Steven Spielberg's remake of War of the Worlds. Specifically, the diner scene when the guy's breaking the glass. That screwed me up. That totally screwed me up.
Yeah, I remember that film, and I remember having such a I love that novel, and I'm also a very, very big fan of the classic from the 50s with the real, model tripod things that are coming in. I just love that classic vintage style. But yeah, Spielberg's War of the Worlds, to your point, highlights a lot of the worst choices that people can make in those kinds of crisis. And I think that's one thing that, love him or hate him, that I appreciate about M. Night Shyamalan is that he is, sometimes to his own detriment, he is very uncynical. He is, I don't think there's a cynical frame in any of his films. There's always an undercurrent of some version of optimism. Again, sometimes to his detriment. But that's something that I really respond to and am willing to kind of forgive and overlook, even if I would acknowledge, like, yeah, that choice wasn't the strongest, but I still enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, cool, man. Let's get to the main meat of the interview.
Sure, let's do it.
So, as I already mentioned, in the intro, you two, you and your co-host Nathan were college friends. How did you meet in college, and what attracted you to each other?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. So we were both in the theater program. So we both came to our university, Gardner-Webb University. We both came there. We joined there at the same time, but we largely didn't know each other through the freshman year. I don't remember and couldn't speak for him for when he got involved in the communications group in the theater department specifically. Speaking for myself, I originally went to college to become a high school English teacher. And then, without getting too much into too many of the details, along the way, kind of shifted my focus away from wanting to be a teacher and got a little bit of the theater bug. Now, I tried my hand at it and wanted to try to see, okay, I want to maybe try out for some plays that they're doing and see what that's like. And in that process, Nathan and I collided. And at one particular, like, sort of late night party, there was a whole bunch of games going on, and he and I just sort of met, and we found we had a lot of the same sensibilities. I think that particular evening, we stayed up way late into the night, he and I just talking and laughing, and just kind of recognizing that we had a lot of the same mindset and a lot of sensibilities. So from there, we just started hanging out more, and then eventually he and I became roommates. So during our senior year of college, he and I were actually roommates in a little house off campus, with another friend that has now moved. I think he lives overseas right now. We're not in very close touch with him anymore. But so Nathan and I became roommates, and then made the decision right after graduation to come and move out to California together. And eventually Nathan moved back to do a whole bunch of things that life throws at you, like start a family and change careers and everything. Yeah, I mean, over time, to answer your other question, like what draws us to each other, I think our sensibilities and our personalities just match. We have a lot of the same values, and we find a lot of the same things funny. But more than anything, I'm very, very grateful that he's the kind of friend that, and hopefully I do the same for him. He's the kind of friend who's able to challenge me in a constructive way. So a lot of times, like the thoughts that he'll have, very caring, very, like I said, I keep wanting to use the word constructive. Like it's a progression forward as opposed to a dragging down or a dragging back. And I've always appreciated that. We've been friends for 2 decades plus now. So
nice.
I'm dating myself quite a bit, but we've been friends for more than 20 years now. And the podcast has been an opportunity not only to, get to have the kind of conversations we would have had off mic anyway, but also to further develop and grow that friendship. And then in an odd sort of way, kind of be grateful to the podcast as a document of that. Because a lot of best friends don't necessarily have that same kind of thing. And sincerely, I'm very thankful that, we're almost 7 years in right now. And there's just hours and hours and hours of conversations with my best friend, which I'm really thankful for, cherish about that. So
for sure, yeah, and I definitely blossom a good relationship with you for sure. You seem like I know you're significantly older than me, by
yes,
like 10 plus years, but I think you're a child at heart a little bit.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing that, because I would like to think that's true.
You're just a bundle of joy, Mr. Lackey.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But likewise, you talking about you being roommates with Nathan. I just remember that story you told, or one of you told, during your Nightmare on Elm Street review that involved late night Halo sessions.
Yes.
I thought that was pretty fun. So if you want to hear more about that, definitely check out the Fear of God episode of Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one.
That's awesome.
Real quick, I forgot to write down this question. This was one that was burning in my mind. This is more of a fun question.
Yeah, sure.
What comedy duo of any era best describes you and Nathan's relationship with each other?
Wow.
So it's, I guess you can kind of come more at it, like what humor style or what comedy style kind of matches with a popular or a big comedy duo.
Man, that is a great question. What's funny is the idea of a comedy duo has kind of gone out of fashion lately. I remember, like, now it's more comedy troupes, comedy ensembles,
Right.
But I will, so I don't know. I would have to give this some more intentional thought, but who immediately came to mind, I know you think it's silly, but who immediately came to mind is actually Laurel and Hardy. So I love Laurel and Hardy. They're really, really fun. They're very, very old, but a lot of their comedy is visual. A lot of their comedy is just working off of slapstick sort of things. what I love about them specifically, as opposed to Abbott and Costello. So Abbott and Costello are very funny and very witty. And I think there's certainly a flavor of what mine and Nathan's friendship has that's got that in mind. But one of the things that I love specifically about Laurel and Hardy is there seemed to be in all of their comedy this undercurrent that even though they would get like aggravated at each other, very specifically Hardy getting aggravated at Laurel. Laurel is the, kind of the bumbling, skinny beanpole kind of straight man guy.
Right.
And Hardy would often get, really frustrated with him. It was like, well, here's another fine mess you've gotten me into. But in all of their comedy that you watch, whether it be the films or the shorts or anything, Laurel and Hardy always had this undercurrent that you could kind of tell that off screen they loved each other. Like you could kind of tell that like these guys really enjoy doing what they do. And maybe that's true of a number of different comedy duos, but I know sometimes it doesn't always bleed into the screen as well. Or you can kind of think that even though they work well together, you don't know how well they get along offhand. And Laurel and Hardy, you just never doubted it. You're like, man, these guys are having drinks and dinners together with their family. They just love what they do. And that's kind of why I think they come to mind with me and Nathan, is because even when we disagree, even when we come down on different sides for a particular film, or when we're trying to make jokes and stuff like that, even when we're like nipping at each other a little bit, I think there's still this undercurrent of like, these guys like each other. They really get along and they really have a good time. So that's why they came to mind, but I'll give that some more thought and see if I have a different answer over time.
And comedy's weird for me because I love to laugh, but it's not a lot of stick with me. But so I can't really think of a lot of comedy duos, but the one I definitely think you're a lot like is Key and Peele.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
I think you're like Key a lot. Keegan-Michael Key, because you're always at 100 and energetic.
Nice.
I honestly think that Jordan Peele's the more talented of them.
Oh, sure.
And this is why Nathan's like him more, is because he can be kind of the straight man, kind of dry sense of humor one moment, and then he can be like wacky and animated, and that's Jordan Peele. But next question: what compelled you to start a horror podcast, and what was the initial reaction from your Christian peer group on starting the podcast?
Oh man, what a great question. So what's interesting is I have wanted to find an outlet for many, many years about how to have conversations that I was having with a whole bunch of people offline about this intersection of horror and faith. So I grew up Christian and have always been interested in matters of faith and I'm still a person of faith. I still am very, very, those considerations are still very vital to just who I am as a person. But I've also very much been a horror fan since I was really, really little. And so the kinds of conversations that I would have with people always revolved around the spiritual significance that you could draw out of really anything that you watched, but especially in a kind of unexpected way from horror and dark and thriller material that might not be particularly the package people would expect, but is still something that you can really sink your teeth into and get a lot out of in some valuable ways if you approach it with the right mindset. Well, I've been looking for an outlet to do that with. And then I partnered up, got in touch, became friends with a guy named Tyler Smith, who had a podcast called More Than One Lesson. More Than One Lesson did podcasts about movies with a faith perspective, just any genre of movies in general. Well, Tyler and I became friends, and we'd been friends for a large number of years. I'd been on his show a number of times. I had become one of the recurring occasional co-hosts on that show. And then just in the process of Tyler and I talking one evening, I mentioned to him that I wanted to do a podcast that just centered on horror and faith. To my knowledge, when I did that, if that had ever been done before, it had only been done from like limited series or from little, movie and faith podcasts that had maybe done something around October. There was one podcast I knew about. Didn't find out about it until after The Fear of God actually was underway, but it predated us, called The Flicks That Church Forgot, from a reverend in England named Peter Laws. And Peter Laws has been on the show before. He's been on Fear of God before. his show predates ours, but I didn't know about it beforehand. And for all I knew, before that happened, like nobody was talking about that intersection of faith and horror. And so when I shared that with Tyler, Tyler was like, well, let me get you started. Well, then, of course, all these ideas are bursting around in my head. So I shared that with Nathan. And when I shared that with Nathan, Nathan and I were talking about it, and we were both like, you know what, we should do this together. Like, I think Nathan even said, like, can I come along with you? And it just made a whole bunch of sense. So we just started it up together. And to answer the second part of your question, the reaction to it, surprising me, the reaction to it was largely positive. We have had, and we had a couple of people out the gate who were very opposed to just the concept in general of what we were doing. And we did have some people over time who didn't like, some of the takeaways that we had, or they didn't like sort of where our minds and our hearts went over time. We've had that throughout the run of the show. We've had a couple of people here and there, but I have to be candid and have to be honest that in terms of the people that have found our show and responded to it, for every individual who didn't like it, or for every individual who kind of dumped on us and said, you shouldn't be doing this, Christians shouldn't be watching this, Christians shouldn't be talking about that, for every individual of that, we've encountered 40 to 50 for every one of those who are very supportive, very encouraging, and some of whom have, come along and just been part of the Fear of God family and have become personal friends of ours, like yourself, like other people. And a lot of those people have come from various different backgrounds. Not all of them are believers. Not all of them are Christians. Not all of them are horror fans, but just people who kind of enjoy the kinds of conversations that we have and want to be part of that community. That's been really rewarding. I've really been thankful for that. So yeah.
Cool, man. So I gotta ask, coming from a Christian point of view, why do you like consuming such dark material, such as horror?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think, to be candid, I think that for the starting place of it, the faith perspective of it doesn't have as much to do with my attraction to horror material as kind of a separate sensibility. So I approach it this way. I am a guy who just loves horror movies. I love them. I always have, for as early as I can remember. I've always loved horror movies. And then I'm also a person to whom faith and considerations of faith are really important. So to me, the marriage of those two things and the intersection of those two things is not very complicated. Like, it doesn't take work for me to watch a horror movie and then draw something a bit, of a faith consideration out of it. Now, naturally, not every single horror movie is going to have some big, deep thing that you have to think about. In fact, there's a whole bunch of them that don't. They're just purely for entertainment value, or they provide a certain schlocky kind of enjoyment. And there's room for all of that too. There's a place for all of that. But where things really pop and sizzle in my mind and imagination are the ones that are interested in drawing out imaginatively the darker and scarier and more sort of dangerous kind of things, and bringing them into a fictional space, so that by observing them in a fictional space, we can maybe have a shot at coping with the things that we're afraid of, or with the things that we're very frustrated by. So basically, by putting on this sort of imaginary fear, we can better cope with the real fear. And not to mention the fact, getting back to the faith idea, there's a tremendous amount of, on paper, if you just read the story, the Bible is chock full of a tremendous amount of really, really scary stuff if you just took it, at its face value. And some of it, even when you
open up the book of Revelation, that's some scary shit.
Oh, absolutely. No joke. Not even just Revelation, but also in the Old Testament, there's tons of really nightmarish things that just happen to people. Things that if you just took that plot and translated them into modern, settings, you could have another horror movie that in just direct translation. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why Knock at the Cabin had a really profound effect on me, because like I'm listening to some of this stuff that David Tisa is saying, and I'm like, holy crap, I actually used to believe that God was like
Mm.
this. Going back to, what you were saying about, consuming dark material in a kind of a safe way. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's
Mm-hmm.
also, and I guess, everybody's different, of course, but I
Sure.
think in small doses, I think it's very healthy for children to consume scary material because it
Mm-hmm.
shows them that the world is not always sunshine and rainbows. And I think it was interesting that I think at several points in his life, Stephen King pointed out that Bambi was the first movie that ever scared him because the mom
Yeah.
dies.
Right. Right. It's
Right.
really dark. Yeah. And I got to be honest that I agree with you. I do try to be sensitive
Mm,
to people who have for whom watching horror movies generates a tremendous amount of anxiety. Like I
right.
think it's important to know your limits and
Mm,
to be healthy about them in the sense that if all you walk away with is a tremendous amount of increased or heightened anxiety, then that's not going to be good for you and don't necessarily need to continue engaging that. But I
right.
do agree that like I love it when I encounter this is a really funny story. So um it's there's this friend of my son's at school, and she is just one of the sweetest little children, like very polite, very well mannered, very very kind. And he's known her. She's gone to school. She's in his grade, and he's known her for quite a while. But what's really interesting is that just recently he found out that she is a very big fan of scary movies.
Oh, cool.
and
Awesome.
when and
Keep them
when he
young.
found
Keep them
yeah,
young.
and when he found that out, I was like, see, it's always the nice ones. Look out for the nice ones because we like that scary stuff. And
Yeah.
but I do think there's something to like if you have the constitution, the palate to be able to absorb that kind of stuff, I do think it can equip you mentally and psychologically
Mm,
for how better to deal with a lot of fears. That's proved itself out in some ways in my own life and in the lives that I see other people engage the same way. And I don't think it's insignificant that in times of great social duress or where there's a lot of scary things going on in the world around us, those are the times that the horror box office thrives. Like the times when there's a lot of scary stuff going on in the real world,
mm,
a lot of people love going to see scary movies. And I think it's true of that same thing. It's like by putting our imaginations in this fictional place for a little while, we can better cope with the real world
right.
troubles.
Well, what's interesting is I think fear, I don't know if it's necessarily part of your nervous system, but it's
Mhm.
similar to it because you think about it, you have to have a nervous system because say if you stick your hand on a burning stove, you have to know that it hurts so you can move away so your hand doesn't
Right,
burn.
right. Yeah,
Same thing with fear. You gotta know that like a Siberian tiger is gonna like tear you up.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
do you and Nathan, do you regularly listen to horror podcasts? And if so, what are some of your favorites?
So interesting. I largely do not. Can't speak for Nathan.
Oh,
I
okay.
I I largely do not, but it's not out of any sort of intentional like lacking of. Now what I will say is I do listen to a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are more centered around like just culture. So like I listen to a lot of NPR, or I have a few other podcasts that I listen to that are just like kind of a similar format to our show where but the subject is different. Just lots of open conversation and things like that. But I will say I did have a really good time listening to a lot of the episodes from there's a podcast called Now Playing that's
Mm,
really popular. I've checked out several of their episodes specifically around horror stuff. Of course, I've checked out Last Podcast on the Left, which I think is really, really fun. But to be candid, there's nothing horror centric. I listen to a lot of podcasts,
mm,
but usually not about horror
right.
unless there is a specific unique episode that I'm seeking out and I want to hear,
Mm,
a couple of different voices about it, but I might seek out something just for that
yeah.
episode and then probably would discard it. What I do listen to a lot of, and I listen to this a lot,
The Fear of God podcast?
No.
You just listen to yourself?
No. I do not do that. But is radio dramas. So there's lots
cool.
there's lots of thriller and horror and
Mm.
sci-fi themed radio dramas out there. Some that are vintage, that are classic from the 50s, 40s, 60s, like X minus
the good old
one.
1950s when that soda was 25 cents.
That's right. Roma Wines presents suspense. Like it's that kind of thing.
Right.
But then also, things like Q Code and Realm, and there's some other podcast networks that make a lot of short form radio dramas, and I listen to a lot of those. So if I'm listening to something that's horror themed, it's usually fiction on that. Like I really got into Aaron Minke's podcast Lore when it was. I don't even know if it's still running. I don't listen to it anymore, but for a while there, I really got into that, which are just like him reading stories of gruesome things that have happened over time. So
one of the things I love about your show is that you can clearly tell that you're extremely strong in your faith, but you don't push that on your show. Was that something that you originally discussed during the inception of Fog?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, we did discuss it. The tagline that you actually cited when you introduced us, the idea of we explore, we don't explain, was rooted in this sensibility of we don't want to be some sort of instructional class. That felt very heady and kind of boring, to be honest. We wanted the opportunity to have a freedom to just kind of explore what was on our hearts and minds as we just navigated the world around us and coped with that. And again, looking at these films and what they might have to say to us, and maybe they don't have to say much to us. Sometimes they don't, or maybe they can help us to kind of deal with some things that are going on in our own hearts and minds. And so it was very intentional that we wanted this to be an open-hearted kind of exploration of these ideas. And in that sense, didn't want to be we didn't want to be dishonest about where we are and what our thoughts are, and what I hope comes through in the episodes, and what I hope you hear as you're listening, is just two people having a very honest conversation. So if something comes up that is something one of us are very passionate about or feel very strongly about, we'll say it. We'll put it out there. But there needs to be a kind of a freedom to say, like, okay, well, I see it differently, or we may come at it from two different places, or maybe we'll agree with each other and build upon each other. But it wasn't so much important to us that we land like a firm talking point that listeners would then be able to like write down in their notebooks and everything. Mostly what we want to do is provoke thought and provoke more conversation. So we want people ideally to be able to, I'm speaking for myself, but I think Nathan would largely agree, that we want people to walk away from listening to our conversations thinking and feeling in different ways than they felt before, hopefully with some encouragement, hopefully with a little bit of challenge of like, ooh, I need to think about that more, and hopefully some fun along the way. So again, we want to provoke thought and we want to provoke more conversation. And in order to do that, you can't incite more good questions if you feel like you constantly have the answers. So we try,
for sure. I think that's one of the issues. I mean, of course, this is not all Christians, but certain Christians, I just feel like they know the answer to everything, and to me, life is about exploring. Different point of views, and I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of walked away from that. I kind of walked away because I just kind of thought they just asked me more than what's in the Bible or what I'm being told from Christians or any religious person. So I'm just kind of open to anything, and I like to talk about religion sometimes if it's appropriate. On my channel,
well,
and even politics too. Though I don't ever talk about who I support and who I don't support, because that starts fires. So I kind of skirt on the issue. Like, for example, we did Running Man a couple of years ago, and we talked about like the whole Me Too kind of thing, and sometimes some of the stuff that comes out is legit and some of it's not legit, and how do you kind of decipher that? Because people have their opinion, and social media didn't really help with that all the time.
No, no, social media is not helpful for that. But no, I resonate a lot with what you said, and I'm very similarly minding. I have always found it very rewarding when I've been able to have an honest and open conversation with somebody who feels differently about something than I do. It can
Okay.
also be rewarding to feel the same and to just have your own, thoughts and directions encouraged or affirmed. But I've always found it rewarding when somebody feels a little bit differently or brings a slightly different perspective, because then I walk away learning something new or thinking about something a little differently. I gain
Absolutely.
something.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Reed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the problem with our society right now is
Hmm.
people just don't want to listen to the other
Yeah.
side. And I think that was probably the biggest problem with something like the J.K. Rowling situation or the Will
Oh
Smith.
yeah.
Uh, People
Hmm.
just were just so gosh darn stuck in their ways. Um,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
real quick, I
They're not
won't draw
curious.
on this too much. Another podcast you have to listen to is the Wish Trials of J.K. Rowling. That
Oh,
goes,
I've heard it.
yeah.
I've heard it. Yeah.
You actually listen to it?
Yep, I listened to it. I was very curious because honestly, another thing that you'll find about me, the more we talk, is I'm very big into self education. So I
Mm,
enjoy, and when I say by self education, I just mean like I'm curious as a
right.
personality, and so I'm always just interested in
Mhm.
learning about things. And when something is making a lot of conversational news, I try to seek out things
Oh,
that
yeah,
will
absolutely.
help me to understand it a little bit better. So yeah, I listened
Yeah.
to that show, and then I also listened to the rebuttal to that show that ContraPoints did. And so like that's kind of how I operate is I try if I can. I don't always succeed, but try if I can to hear like, okay, I want to hear from this side
Mm,
of the discussion. And then if there's something that's reputable and informed and thoughtful, I want to hear from the other side of the conversation as well.
yeah.
And then through that I can hopefully form a more full-bodied
Mhm.
opinion about something that at least takes other things into
Right.
consideration.
I think one thing that I really took away from that podcast, the Wish Trials of J.K.
Mhm.
Rowling,
Yeah.
was the fact that because people in the trans community are so oppressed,
Mhm.
they don't have a lot of power, and so attacking J.K. Rowling and saying violent things to her and saying all these sexual, vile things to her gives
Mm,
them a lot of
mhm.
power, unfortunately.
It was listening to that show. That show definitely makes the case for how either that dynamic could be
Mm,
at play, or just the sense of unbridled anger and fury at how so much hurt and pain has been funneled down through that other direction.
mm,
And that it's got to go somewhere, and sometimes
yeah.
when a name or a face attaches themselves to it, and especially if they have the perspective that she has. I remember when I was listening to that show, I remember thinking and feeling just a big roller coaster of
Mm.
emotions while I was
Well,
listening to
me
that
too.
show.
Me too. Me and
and
you,
and
both brothers.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes I was like right there with what they were saying, and
Mm,
other times I was like tilting my head a little sideways.
mm,
But I feel like what's really important, and I think one of the big takeaways of something like that is, again, a reminder to always be willing to hear what somebody has to say, and to be able to hopefully position yourself in a place where you can have a substantive conversation, and not just necessarily pick a side and stake one really firm claim. There are certain issues where you have to be very firm, and you have to
mm,
be very you have to take a bold stand. I feel that there are some issues that warrant that, but I think in most cases it's really important that we keep our hearts open and our ears open, and understand a little bit more, like, okay, well, what's going on from the other side, and why do they have the perspective that they have, and how can we try to learn more about that so that we can hopefully either enrich our own selves and maybe change our opinion, if our opinion should be
right.
changed, or at the very least can be more informed about what the challenge
So
is.
on a lighter note, what is your favorite Halloween treat? So like candy,
Ooh.
drinks.
Yeah. Favorite specifically Halloween treat is pumpkin seeds. So every
Ooh,
Halloween,
interesting.
it's become a bit of a tradition lately that my son and I carve pumpkins, and then whatever we carve the pumpkins into, I take all the seeds out, and then I will experiment around usually with 3 or 4 different flavorings for depending on however many seeds we get out of
Mm,
2 or 3 pumpkins. Um, some of them will be like garlic parmesan or buffalo ranch, or I will just experiment out with those. And so I
right.
look forward every Halloween to having however many I make. Maybe I'll make 3 flavors, 4 flavors, whatever it is, batches of pumpkin seeds. That's my favorite.
Right.
I love those. Yep.
All right. So I got one more question, but before I get to that last question, I just gotta ask you, Reed, what's in the box?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh.
I just have to do it. So last question. What movie didn't have to be horror necessarily, but what movie is the most accurate to your view of the afterlife?
Oh wow. That's a good one. And to be candid with you, I'm not sure if one has really struck on to that. I don't think there is a film that reflects necessarily my view of what happens after we die. A lot of, a lot of sort of fictional representations of what that might look
Mm,
like or what that might be like. Um, Not necessarily a movie, not really a movie, but I will reference like when I think about things like that. Um, one of the things that I like to think about is did you ever see, and this will be some huge spoiler territory if you haven't, but did you ever see the TV show Lost?
the first maybe 4 or 5 seasons.
Okay, so what I'll do is without spoiling some things
I
that
don't care.
happen
I'm
in
never
that
gonna
show.
watch it again.
is there is a concept in that show that maybe after we die, we have an opportunity to sort of be in a little different framework or in a little
Hmm.
different way. Still ourselves, still rooted in who we are, but seeing things a little bit differently, sometimes directly in opposition for how we spent most of our time. And in that process, we kind of work some things out, right?
Right.
Now I don't really think, I should be clear about this. I don't really think that kind of happens after we
Mm,
die. But what I like to imagine and what I like to think about is that when we move on from here, we move into a place to where we do gain better understanding and we're able to confront ourselves and sometimes our not so great qualities, sometimes our really admirable qualities, the things we really need forgiveness for and the things we really need to make right and the things that maybe we did well that we can hold on to and cherish those relationships. What I do believe is that when we move on, that is what we move on into. There's an old Bible verse that said, well, all the Bible verses are old, but there's a Bible verse that says, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And much of what I believe about that is that basically, like, when we enter into, I'm just going to speak from
mm,
honestly from myself, that I believe that when we enter into God's presence, that is what we are entering into, a coming to understand who we are and to confront ourselves, which can be kind of scary,
right.
and also to kind of come into a better understanding, and into a greater and richer sense of peace. And I don't know if any film, back to your question, I don't know if any film has really tangibly expressed that imaginatively in a way that strongly resonates with me. I will say there's another film that's a little bit more recent to anchor it
Mm,
to a film. Um, is one thing that kind of scratches at some of those ideas, though I think it has a different perspective than what I'm describing, is the film Everything Everywhere All at Once,
okay.
which is not talking about death and dying, but is talking about like endless possibilities. And I feel like, whatever it is that's waiting for us is something that, of course, in my view, I believe not only God, but of course I'm a Christian, so I
Mm,
believe that Jesus that the presence of Christ is something that will, again, permit us to really understand who we are, what our purpose is, what our intentions are, what our hopes, our dreams, what they all amounted to. And I think we enter into a journey and exploration of greater and richer understanding of that, coming to terms with it, coming to terms and to peace with ourselves. And it's actually interesting that you say that, because I will have to see if there's a film out there that I think really reflects that. But nothing comes to mind that has really accurately represented that for me. But what a great question. I think that's a really, really good question.
Awesome. So I know we're kind of short on time right now.
Sure.
I do have a would you rather game. I got like 7 of them. If you don't
okay.
mind, we can reduce them to maybe like 2 or 3. Well, actually,
if we go quick, I'm down for them.
Okay, then I got another one that's separate from that. I gotta know that before we wrap up.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll say that one for the very last to wrap up the whole interview.
Sounds good. I love would you rather games.
Yeah. So this is would you rather horror villain edition, and I'm gonna give you 2 horror villains, and you gotta tell me which one of these classic villains would you rather be killed by.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
So we'll be less horrible for you.
Okay. Less horrible. Which would I rather? Okay.
Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees?
Jason Voorhees, man, because he's going to be quick. He's going to be quick to it. Freddy's going to make a snack out of it, and he's going to torture me. So, no, it's going to be Jason.
I love to be Freddy over Jason. That'd be fun.
That's true. I'd rather have Jason kill me.
Yeah. The Xenomorph or the Tall Man?
Xenomorph. Again, got to go for quick there. It's going to be painful. Yeah. It's going to be rough, but I got to go for quick. Yeah.
I don't remember Phantasm, so I don't really have an answer there.
Sure.
This is really hard. Pinhead or Vecna?
Oh man.
They're both horror. And now with Pinhead, remove the eternal torment part about it.
Okay. Just the death aspect of it.
Yeah.
Taking a different tack here, I'm going to go Vecna on that one because I think I have a chance of beating him. I have no chance of beating Pinhead.
That's one of my greatest fears, and that's another reason why I kind of went away from Christianity. It's like the whole torment part of hell and demons and that.
I get it. Yep.
Well, I've never seen a Hellraiser. Moving on, the shark from Jaws or the raptors from Jurassic Park?
The shark from Jaws. From Jaws. Yep. I want him because listen, he's gonna just take me out. He's just gonna get done with it. The raptors, as Jurassic Park indicates to us, you are alive when they start to eat you. No, thank you. Give me Bruce. Give me the shark.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like you have to be in a geographical location like the ocean for Jaws.
Okay.
But raptors could be anywhere, so
that's true too. Yeah.
The killer from Mike Flanagan's Hush or the Moonlight Man from Gerald's Game?
Moonlight Man from Gerald's Game.
Really?
He's scary. Yeah, he's scarier.
Really?
He's scarier, but listen, he's only made a Moonlight. Again, this is all about survival, and so like he's only made a Moonlight, so you can you get the right combination. You can withstand and escape him.
From Charles Darwin. That's kind of funny because you're being a Christian and
hey, listen. Yeah, I'm open-minded and curious.
Yeah. Okay, last one of this kind of would you rather, and then I got another would you rather.
Okay.
Art the Clown from Terrorizer or the Deadites. So keep in mind, both will taunt the hell out of you.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. I got to go Deadites. On that. So for 2 reasons. Number one, I feel like there is a chance if I, have the right sensibility that I might be able to take them out. If I don't, it'll probably be pretty quick. Whereas, man, Art, dude, I don't know what he's going to do. It's too unbridled. It's too, I can't take it. So
I feel like that one's the hardest one because they're both kind of
tough. Oh no, it's totally tough. But give me the Deadites. I'm gonna go for the Deadites.
Yeah. And just real quick, the last would you rather, and then we'll be done with this interview. As some of your viewers may know, that you wrote a draft or a treatment for a film called The Victim. that Michael
Yes.
Biehn eventually directed and starred in with Danielle Harris and then his wife. I believe I can't remember her name.
Jennifer
Yeah,
Blanc. Yep.
it's nothing against you, but the final product in that movie is not great. It's one of those. It's one of those so bad it's good movies. It's one of those movies that I feel like a channel like Red Letter Media would review and just make fun of.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah,
Hey, I don't take it personally. I
yeah.
understand. I understand.
So on that note, what famous Michael Biehn character would you want to protect you in the zombie apocalypse? Kyle Reese
Good one.
from Terminator or Corporal Hicks from Aliens?
Give me Hicks. Give me Hicks.
Okay.
Armed to the teeth,
Yep.
and he's armed to the teeth, and he's tough. And listen, Kyle Reese is a great soldier, but he doesn't survive that movie. And Hicks does survive his movie. He doesn't survive.
Well, he's actually
the beginning of the next one.
Right.
But
Kyle is actually in Apocalypse, so
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But no, give me Colonel Hicks on that one. So
Sweet,
yes,
man.
that's who I'm going to go with.
Yeah. Too bad we have to cut this short, man. But I'll try to save some of these questions till next time we talk.
Yeah, we can talk again. Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely like maybe the week before October, I want to do a horror movie trivia between me and you.
Ooh, that would be so much fun.
Yeah, and Eric can be the rap and the question asker person.
Yeah,
that'll be so much fun.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, I want to see who can do it, and it could be like a Sugar Ray Leonard or Sugar Ray Robinson, like Jake LaMotta thing. It would just keep going at each other.
Oh man, that would be great. Hey, listen, I think you stand a really, really strong chance of beating me. So, but I would have so much fun doing it. So yes, I would love it. We should do it.
Yeah, cool, man. So I guess I'll not kick you off, but I'll take you off of here because I'm gonna record something after this to kind of wrap things up.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome.
So yeah, you have a good one, man. Nice talking to you again.
Thank you. It's really good to
shortly.
Yep, really good to talk to you. Hope you have a great day. Thank you again.
All right, guys. So that was my interview with Reed Lackey from the Fear of God podcast. Very insightful. Really liked some of the stuff we brought up with, trying to see things from different points of view, and then kind of relating it to the most recent podcast about the J.K. Rowling situation. That was all interesting, and I liked how we kind of ended it on a lighter note with the would you rather and the favorite Halloween candy and all that stuff, and then of course gotta do the what's in the box thing. That was a lot of fun. Got some editing to do that I wasn't expecting, so that's gonna be fun. 'Cause I want to get this out this weekend as we're recording this. So yeah, I'm gonna work on that. So anyways, guys, I'm just rambling because that's just how my brain works. So anyways, guys, just one more thing. The next episode of the MCU Look Back is going to be coming up this Wednesday. So be looking forward to that because we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, and First Ant. And so that should be a lot of fun. If you like this video, make sure and you want to see more spooky and weird content, make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe. And this has been Drew from Horror, Sci-Fi, and Beyond. Over and out. Bye.